No amount of reviews would have prepared me as to how disappointed I would be after reading The Ministry of Time. And it's not because of what you might think, it's actually because it has so much potential that is simply wasted.
Well, how is it possible that all these things happened to us, but no time passed on Earth? Did you go back in time to save us?
I didn't have to because of Jeremy Bearimy.
Who's Jeremy Bearimy?
Time on Earth moves in a straight line. One thing happens, then the next, then the next. Time in the afterlife moves in a Jeremy Bearimy.
What?
In the afterlife, time doubles back and loops around and ends up looking something like Jeremy Bearimy. This is the timeline in the afterlife. Happens to kind of look like the name Jeremy Bearimy in cursive English, so that's what we call it.
Okay, but, what the hell is this? The dot over the I. The hell is that?
Okay, how do I explain this concisely? This is Tuesdays and also July.
And sometimes it's never.
That's true. Occasionally, that moment on the Bearimy timeline is the time moment when nothing never occurs. So, you get it.
This broke me. The dot over the I. That broke me. I'm done.
Hi, I'm Stellian, lightworker, storyteller of the Disty Alchemist, and I run the Alchemy Book Club. It might be an island of one, but it features a lot of powerful books. And for October, I chose to read The Ministry of Time by Killian Bradley, a book that made a promise that it would be about time travel. And it failed miserably on that promise. Yes, time travel was part of the story, but mostly it was a story about love. And for the larger part of the story, it was a story about unreciprocated love, about somewhat building the idea of limerence and obsessing over the male gaze, or rather, not receiving it. So, from the very beginning, the story fell flat because it didn't feature the time travel that it promised. And the story began with time travel. The story began with the description of this project that is being done for the very first time in history. And it invited us to be part of that story, where the main character was a bridge that was assisting a time traveler with adjusting in the 21st century. The introduction was promising, and then we were given 5 chapters that were painfully long, 5 chapters that featured so much build up around a romance story that was never central within the marketing. So when you have a team of 15, 20, 50 people that are together, working together to generate your marketing campaign, and they all decide, let's use the time travel piece to promote this story, but fail to mention that largely this book is about a romantic story, a love story, it just disappoints the reader to the point of no return. And this is kind of what happens, especially when you reach that horrendous sex scene somewhere in the middle, 6th or 7th chapter. Yeah, I'm disappointed. I'm happy that I finished the book, and I'm happy that I included it in the Alchemy Book Club, and I'm happy that I witnessed it. But it was a disappointing book altogether because of the mixture of false advertising and having an idea that has so much promise that was simply handled badly by the author. So not only was the sex scene horrendous and it cheapened the novel, because it once again proved that the book wasn't even about the time travel. It was about the author's desire to explore a sexual relationship with an individual that she found desirable from the very beginning of writing this book. But it was clunky writing with, I would admit, unique sentences. I've highlighted a lot of sentences that I found uniquely interesting as part of the larger body. Some of the sentences occasionally made you want to vomit. Yes, they weren't just cringy, they were just like, oh. That's the general experience I have of the book. Very unfiltered, but it's the first time in a long time I managed to read a book this fast, and I managed to read a book with a lot of anticipation because it was one of the most liked and awarded books of 2024. So lots of potential wasted in the mind of an English literature graduate. The book felt like it was written by someone who had only the freedom to channel their ideas through an academic route and was suppressed because of the academic restrictions. And so this suppressed the soul of the writer, which caused the storytelling the biggest damage, that it lacked consciousness. It lacked the conscious awareness that a channeled idea might bring to the reader. And so the time travel piece was there, but it was so minimal that it almost felt like it wasn't there. It almost felt like you were watching a James Bond movie just as you were about to discover the secret room that was leading us to the time travel door. The woman in the red dress from the Matrix came through, and suddenly the whole plot was derailed. But it wasn't a woman in a red dress, it was a man in a red suit, so to speak, because it wasn't male gaze, it was female gaze, which I'd argue is not such a big contribution to literature. If you examine the background of the author Killian Bradley, she attended a private secondary school and she graduated with a degree in English literature. And the book feels like it was written by someone who has a degree in English literature. The characters were built as if they were part of a literature assignment. I know because I studied creative writing. They were confined to being puppets, to handling their scenes and handling their dialogue, their monologues in a very constricted space. And this could have been a really extraordinary, imaginative, and powerful book, but unfortunately, it wasn't. And I'm disappointed. I'm angry because of that. So I suppose the author succeeded in getting an emotional reaction from the audience, but unfortunately, it's not a positive one. I think the ending I liked, but there is a long gap from the first chapter to the last 50 pages that unfortunately creates such a huge division in the psyche as you're reading this book, because you're dissociating in order for you to get to the ending. And that never is a good thing when you're reading a book. That being said, I don't regret adding the Ministry of Time to the Alchemy Book Club. I think it gives you the playground that you need for your own imagination to keep building on the time travel piece in particular. But I would have liked to see more, to read more. And even if the author writes a second book, I don't think it will focus on the time travel piece with the necessary consciousness that it requires. I think time travel is the type of theme we should be exploring in the 21st century, 2025, as we're moving to 2026. But it needs to be approached from the lens of metaphysics and not English literature, because it just shows surface level understanding of the subject, and it shows a repression inside the author. It shows trauma that was brought to the book instead of being handled internally, so that the author can actually channel an idea that brings higher consciousness, and it provokes higher consciousness in the readers. And I think this is one of the reasons I'm recording this video, is that it reflects also the status quo of the publishing industry as it is today, and it showcases the barricades to entry. So unless you have graduated from a top university, unless you know somebody in the industry, unless you have connections, unless you're the son and daughter of someone, unless you made an impression on someone of importance, it's very difficult to get inside the industry. And unfortunately, the industry has not awakened just yet. And so even its contemporary masterpieces fail to impress, precisely because they've been judged and curated by people that are not awakened, that are not conscious to the point that is necessary for the books, even debut novels, to challenge you at the level of your own consciousness. And I had similarly experienced the same resistance when reading the book when I read Energize, because it gave me the surface level of managing your energy. It gave me the, change your habits, the atomic habits type of blueprint, but it didn't give me the metaphysical explanation that I so desperately craved to see from a recognized book that talks about something as important as energy in today's world as part of the spiritual awakening context. Authors fear to fully give their soul creative expression, and I think this is why their books are suffering and the readers of those books are suffering or continue to suffer, because they're not being given the full picture, they're not being given the full representation. Will I recommend the book? Probably, but it will be very difficult to change my opinion and my rating from 3 stars to 4. I can see that it has certain features that might give it the necessary success to reach 4 stars out of 5, but I'm leaning more towards 3 stars. And it's been a while since I've rated a book with 3 stars, a book that scarred me to the point where I don't want to give it a higher rating, mostly because it disappointed me so much. And I think even having supporting characters to the depth that the author had created with the Ministry of Time, it was not sufficient. The leading characters were flawed, and not in a perfectly inhuman way, but rather they were flawed because they were corrupted from the very beginning. That being said, if you are awakening and you are attracted to the book, there might be something in the book for you. I know that I found the last 50 pages quite exquisite compared to the rest of the book, and there was a little bit of a channeled free flow when it came to the last 50 pages. Some really interesting themes were explored in the last 50 pages, including the future of Earth and why that future might be a little bit more dystopian than we think. But again, we've seen that in other shows, in other books. One in particular from Amazon TV series. Yes, I'm talking about The Peripheral. The Peripheral had the exact same presentation of London that the Ministry of Time did. So it wasn't anything original. There were original elements within the story, but they were so abruptly taken away and they were so minimized compared to this big, huge love story that in the end it didn't even matter that much. It mattered to the author, and I'm sure that it changed her life in some way, but it was disappointing to see how much of the story was that and not the time travel piece. I think when you're ambitiously declaring to the world that you're going to write a book called The Ministry of Time, and you're proposing that there is a brand new branch of government that is talking about time travel, and you do not give it the justice that it deserves, you fail. You have failed the assignment of bringing this idea to life. Last year, I included the Dallergut Dream Department Store, which kind of reminded me of the Ministry of Time and vice versa. And while the Dallergut Dream Store was a very simple story, it didn't pretend to be something that it's not. And I think this was one of my main issues with the Ministry of Time. It pretended to be something that it wasn't. And I know we saw that in the book as well. Like there were a lot of characters that pretended to be something that they're not. But ultimately, for a book that mentions that, it talks about behavioral psychology, that one of the main characters also is part of that psychology background field, and you are unable to dissect human behavior to the depth that you're promoting the book, I'm just disappointed, largely disappointed. And not just in the author, I'm also disappointed by the team of people that worked on this book and didn't see the problems in the book. And I'm sure these are people that are very they feel very achieved, accomplished, and successful in their fields. And I'm angry that the industry is not changing as fast as it can, as it should, as some might argue, because we're awakening and we're seeking for guidance in these books. Yes, we are. The guidance isn't just coming from fiction books. It's also coming from non-fiction books when they're channeled properly. And this was not a channeled idea. This was a botched idea. This was an idea that had so much potential and it was ruined. Because whatever was supposed to be contained in that book was completely hijacked by this love story that, sure, it traveled through time and space, but ultimately, did it teach us anything? I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure. And earlier this year, I included Water Moon in the Alchemy Book Club. And honestly, read that book. If you haven't read The Ministry of Time and you haven't read Water Moon, read Water Moon. This is how you write a book. And I think it's also a debut book as well. Fantastic storytelling, imaginative, beyond comprehension, reminded me of Murakami. I was blown away. These are two of the books that have blown me away that I've read as part of the Alchemy Book Club: Dallergut, Dream Department Store, and Water Moon. These are the two books that have blown me away with the amount of creativity and the expansion of idea or fragments of ideas that were contained exactly when they needed to be collected and then expanded and shared in such a beautiful way that they continue to blossom inside my own psyche, inside my own conscious and unconscious mind, and they keep on giving me more as I continue to live and observe and explore and experiment and experience. The Ministry of Time, however, felt flat in comparison, and I think this is the difference, especially in today's world, especially now that I've done so much of my awakening, and I can be a judge of the author's current state of consciousness. This is the difference when you're reading a book by someone that has aligned with their consciousness, with their soul, and someone who hasn't. I look forward to seeing what else Kellyanne Bradley brings to Earth with the world. But I'll be wary next time that I read something from her. I mean, she's succeeded in bringing an emotional reaction out of me. I just wish she had succeeded in unlocking something in me at the level of my soul, because she had already unlocked it herself. But alas, she hasn't. This is a win for the academic world, but it's not one for our collective humanitarian world, not just yet. That being said, we need more time travel stories, and I'm sure that there are already channeled books around time travel that would give us clues around how to unlock more of our dormant abilities. And if you, like me, occasionally time travel while you sleep, you know why the book feels flat and falls flat. Because there are certain things that you might experience as part of your quantum jumping, and that is worth writing about and including in your storytelling, because we are each capable of doing it. And I'm not talking about astral projecting, I'm literally talking about witnessing different parallel timelines as part of your own abilities. Some might say that we each have a time traveler inside of us, and I know I've certainly seen the future on various occasions in my life where I didn't know that was happening as part of my sleeping. So this book was the product of someone who has not experienced their spiritual awakening. And maybe if I found that book 10 years ago, it would have impressed me largely. But today, it just feels like a woman in her 30s can produce something much more meaningful for people, because it felt like it was aimed at teenagers. And that was not the book promise. That was not the book marketing. And if that was the book marketing, then change the book marketing, because it doesn't reflect the actual story. Anyway, this is the book we're reading in November if you want to join the Alchemy Book Club. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, like, subscribe, and share your thoughts if you've already finished The Ministry of Time.